Good afternoon. This is my College Achieve Public Schools presentation. My name is Joanna Espinal. I want to begin this presentation by explaining what WIDA is, and the best way to explain it to any administrator, teacher, student, parent is the following way. So Nike is an iconic symbol that everybody can recognize. WIDA should be the same when you're thinking about ESL bilingual students. Why? So Nike is a brand that has different types of sneakers, and everyone can recognize the iconic Air Force Ones, Air Max, and Jordans. So WIDA is just like that. It's the brand for 3 different types of tests. Here are the 3 different types of tests. You have the WIDA screener. The important thing to know about a WIDA screener is a student coming from another country, entering the United States into a school system can take the WIDA screener only once. A lot of schools fail to do this correctly because they don't know how to use the DRC system. So if the student moves from one state to another, they'll mistakenly give that student a screener again and again, and that's not the correct thing to do. The second test is the WIDA model. It started 4 years ago, and it became available both online and on paper, depending on what the school district decides. The point of the test is to check in on the student, to check on their progress. The last test that's been around from the very beginning is the WIDA access test. This test happens once a year, and the goal is to reach the 4.5 score mark to exit the program. So the WIDA screener, as I explained, once in a child's lifetime upon entering the United States and living in one of the 41 states that provide the WIDA screener or WIDA test. And the test determines what level of ESL the student will be placed in, depending on what program the district has. So if the child, for example, scores a 2.1 on the screener, most likely they will be placed in a level 2 ESL. So the best way to think about the screener is that this is when a child or a student is starting the race. And the WIDA model is the second test that I mentioned. And important thing to know about the WIDA model, although it just started 4 years ago, what you want to do is you want to check on the student's progress. So if we're connecting it to a race, while they're running the race, we want to check in with them. This is important because sometimes, for example, a child comes in from another country and is experiencing what they call the silent period. It's a shock factor that has to be connected and given to a child. It's a new country, a new school system, a new household, sometimes a new family that they're living with, family members. Sometimes they're reconnecting with a mother or father who left them at the age of 2 and they never had a relationship with. All those factors taken into consideration. Let's use the example of the student that scored a 2.0 when they first arrived on the screener. In the middle of the year, let's say January, you provide that same student with the WIDA model because you start to see that they're doing really well and you're thinking, maybe they weren't properly placed. You're checking in on them and then you get the results right away. And you realize, wow, they scored a 3.6. So now you're legally able to move them from an ESL 2 to an ESL 3. And the last one is the WIDA access test, and that's basically once a year, you report to the state how the child is progressing in their language um, abilities, and to see their level of proficiency from one year to another. So the goal there also is if they obtain a 4.5 or higher, they can move to general education courses. But the same with the model. If one year they scored a 1.2, the next year they scored a 2.5, we're scheduling them to a different ESL level. And the goal of this one is to, end the race correctly in the correct amount of years. If you have a student in the program 4 or 5 years or more, it should raise a lot of red flags for the district to see exactly what is happening and how to make adjustments to the district's program. So now that you understand WIDA and the 3 different types of tests, I think it's important that you understand the 4 parts to the test, regardless if it's the screener, the model, or the access test. WIDA always tests a child in different orders: listening in English, reading in English, writing in English, and speaking in English. So these 4 components are important to assess the language ability of a child acquiring a new language. Usually it's referred to an L1 language. Their native language is their L1. L2 is the second language they're acquiring. And here I'm just showing you the 41 states that accept and conduct the WIDA test, all 3 forms of it. The most important thing with knowing this is how to communicate from state to state. So if you have a student that came from Florida and transferred to a school in New Jersey, our district, and avoiding the mistakes of providing the child with a screener all over again, providing them with an incorrect schedule or not properly placing them is what needs to happen to have an efficient program.